Atlanta's streets never really slumber. And as everyone who has lived there knows, there are a lot of secrets, rumors, and temptations in the air. Neon lights are more than just glowing. People are drawn into their stories by them. Music seeps out of every corner as like it had a confession to make. Furthermore, the murmurs that accompany the heat are warnings rather than merely whispers. However, on this specific Saturday evening, rumors weren't just rumors. They became cries that reverberated via social media. Hashtags flying quicker than the eye could scroll. 3 names stood in the middle of it all, clinging to the headlines. Mendeecees, Yandy Smith, and Tamar Braxton. What started off as a birthday party turned into a controversy that made the entire city talk. Disagreeing fans and a lady awakening in her own house, wet with blood. Her nose was damaged, her teeth were fractured, and her dignity was in shambles. One question was posed by the internet. Searing question that would not go away. Was it already darkness, or was this an accident? Smith got her at last. Retribution. It had begun like every other night. She was accompanied by Tamar Braxton, who is no stranger to scandal or publicity, enduring companion. Funky Deneva, a vocal media personality, for supper at Roots Chris Steakhouse. The mood was joyous and lively, with wine glasses clinking, laughter erupting from the table, and pictures taken to document a relaxed time. However, Atlanta has the ability to transform carefree evenings into violent storms. The atmosphere had changed by the time the group moved to the notorious V12 Lounge on Spring Street. Tiny dot within V12's faint illumination. No one could ignore what was happening. Several witnesses claim that Tamar Braxton wasn't merely interacting with pals. Allegedly, she was imprisoned alongside Mendeecees Harris, who is widely known as Yandy Smith's spouse, and has previously hauled his marriage through accusations of infidelity, jail time, and humiliation in public. As recounted, the scenario was not innocent. It wasn't informal. It was impolite. Witnesses described intense body language and muttering that was more audible than the music. Too familiar, too cozy, too near. Imagine entering the cloud of flashing lights and loud bass if you were there. Music. Seeing Mendeecees Harris and Tamar Braxton huddled together at a booth, leaning too close and giggling too loudly. Would your instinct tell you that something untidy was about to happen, or would you brush it off as friendly? The answer was clear to most of Atlanta. Hands brushed too frequently, according to witnesses. The laughter went for too long, and when the two departed the club little after 1 a.m. together. MSU conjecture spread like wildfire, and everyone is aware of 1 a.m. means difficulty, temptation, and unsettling tales in Atlanta. Imagine Yandy Smith, a lady who has supported her husband through adultery receipts, screenshots, controversy after scandal, and jail attempts. Imagine looking through your phone and seeing websites exploding with articles about your spouse, seeing Tamar Braxton in the middle of the night while sneaking out of a lounge. Would you dismiss it as rumors? Or would years of humiliation ultimately cause the anger to flare up? Tamar Braxton shared a terrifying news on social media a few hours later. She awoke in her house bruised and bleeding, with a damaged nose, missing teeth, and the eerie section. "I don't remember what happened," she said. "Only trauma and stillness, with no clarification or explanation." There ought to have been answers. The streets were allowed to construct their own conclusion because of that quiet. Additionally, their conclusion was vicious. The murmurs became a single, distinct story. It was Yandy Smith who had lost it. It was impossible to overlook the timing. Mendeecees Harris and Tamar Braxton departed the lounge. She extended an invitation to him. A few others, including Funky Deneva, attended an after-party at her house. Funky Deneva acknowledged it himself. He verified that Tamar unlocked her doors once the vehicle dropped them all off. Even though he vowed not to stay upstairs, the rumors were connected by his own statements. And if Mendeecees Harris was in the car, when it arrived at Tamar's residence, and hours later, Tamar was found broken and covered in blood. Was it a jump, really? To believe Yandy Smith had learned. The alleged Yandy retribution hypothesis does not originate from void. It originated from a too precise timetable. The rumors became a common joke on social media, but there wasn't any genuine laughter. As comments poured in, memes made fun of Tamar Braxton with titles like, "Don't play with another woman's husband," implying that the lady who was allegedly Yandy's cousin Kishoff was her. It's possible that Silent Enforcer arrived to take care of things while Yandy held her hands. The streets were clean. No evidence was required. All they required was a chronology and a purpose, which Yandy Smith possessed. However, before we blame, let's not ignore the chaos that is already encircling Mendeecees Harris. He had a well-established reputation. Tasha K had previously aired him out with images, claims from ladies who say they were with him, and purported voice notes. Whether or not she was believed, her platform possessed authority, and her charges cast a shadow on his reputation that never went away. Next followed Alexis Sky's friend's Instagram Live when she audaciously exclaimed that from the beginning, Mendeecees Harris had been unfaithful. Alexis eventually expressed regret for his involvement in the debacle, but the harm was done. Mendeecees was already deemed unfaithful by the world. Yandy Smith has acknowledged her own mistake. She revealed how shaky her marriage was already when she admitted to establishing an emotional bond with a trainer in London. The base was broken. The allegiance was called into doubt. So, the narrative wasn't only about a crazy night when Tamar Braxton came into play. It has to do with the potentially broken straw. The patience of Yandy, finally. This is the section that makes fans tend to want retribution. At 10:08 a.m., Funky Denva acknowledged receiving an SMS from Tamar. A frantic message the next morning. Not lighthearted, not informal. She requested a dentist's number. That isn't what happens after a fun-filled evening. That's a woman's lament after she was physically ruined by something she was unable to describe. And still, there is no apology, no denial, only malice, conjecture, and memes that take advantage of her suffering. In the metropolis of Atlanta, no secret endures. Whispers spread more quickly than the wind, and everyone knows someone. The news quickly spread outside the club as Tamar Braxton was seen exiting the lounge with Mendeecees Harris. As it moved through the streets, it changed into news and ended up in the laps of admirers who already thought Yandy Smith would never put up with such mistreatment. Would you be like her? Would you let the internet make fun of your marriage once more? Or would you finally make someone pay for the one thing that cameras could never capture? Tamar wasn't the only target of the rumors that evening. Yandy was dragged. Mendeecees was dragged. Funky DeNova was pulled along. Furthermore, everyone's silence behind the rumors cried out louder than any explanation could be possible. The rumors were never dispelled by Tamar Braxton. They were never refused by Mendeecees Harris. Yandy Smith's marriage was never defended. Because of their quiet, a tale of treachery, violence, and retaliation was able to emerge from the streets. Atlanta wasn't prepared to part with it. After Tamar Braxton's bloodied post, the rumors persisted. They grew, swirling into a cacophony so loud that the vibrations could be felt far outside of Atlanta. Feeds on social media became criminal scenes in which fans lined up screenshots, timestamps, and speculations like evidence on a wall in the role of investigators. And one name emerged across it all. Yandy Smith, higher than the others. She was portrayed as the brains behind the mayhem, the quiet storm that caused it, and the lady who had finally taken action. Own hands following years of disgrace. The timeline was repeatedly examined. At 1 a.m., Tamar Braxton departs the V12 club. Traveling with Mendeecees Harris. Together with Funky Den, they arrive at her house in a small group. From the club, there is laughter. The humming energy is still present. Secrets are born at this type of after-party. The splitsome individuals then start to leave. Some people remain. A few hours later, Tamar is found. Her nose crumbled, her teeth were gone, and she was bleeding and broken. However, not a single surveillance camera or eyewitness came forward to shed light on the situation. Without it, the streets filled up the gaps with their own beliefs. Yandy Smith doesn't tolerate rudeness. However, let's take a step back and examine the psychology. On reality TV, Yandy Smith isn't renowned for being a lady who shouts or switches roles. She portrays the well-mannered, astute wife. She is calculating, focused on business, and fiercely loyal to her brand. And the murmurs were more credible because of that very character. People thought Yandy was too intelligent to go straight, up to Tamar Braxton, that rather she had those who could speak for her while she maintained her public persona. Abruptly, the name Cousin Kesha began to spread. Once more. A mysterious character in Atlanta rumor circles, who was supposedly Yandy's muscle, and who handled objects that the cameras were never able to capture. The bloggers just required a villain, not evidence. Yandy Smith effortlessly transformed into that antagonist. The memes, meanwhile, became cruder. Tamar Braxton's pre- and post-event photos appeared side by side. She was ridiculed in the captions as though her anguish was amusing. Yandy's job. Some made jokes, while others laughed. You will wake up like Tamar if you sit too near to another woman's boyfriend. It wasn't only rumors. It was bodily suffering on top of public humiliation. And Tamar, who constructed a career on clapping back, on using her words to pull others, and on being quiet. No answer could overpower that quiet. Consider this. If that were to happen, wouldn't Tamar Braxton be the first to go live with his hair pulled up and ready to correct the record? She would deny the affair, condemn the blogs, and defend her reputation, wouldn't she? Fans of Tamar are aware of that. However, all that was present was stillness, the eerie sight of her injured face, and a mysterious request from Funky Denva for a dentist. Silence may convey a variety of meanings: shame, remorse, fear, or just plain tiredness. However, silence is perilous in the worlds of hip-hop and love, because if you don't speak, the streets will tell your tale. And what did Mendeecees do while Tamar remained silent? He never takes action. His method of survival there has always been quiet. He doesn't say no. He doesn't confess. He permits the women to go about. Him battle the conflicts that his decisions have sparked. Fans have often witnessed this trend in action. On screen, Instagram threads, off-screen, reunions, and stages. While the mayhem rages, Mendeecees stands in the center and hardly does anything to halt it. He has been shielded by his quiet, but he has also been condemned since people tend to assume the worst when you don't say anything. Then there, Yandy Smith was the one. Her quiet was carefully chosen. It wasn't passive. Although her identity was tarnished by blogs, she kept sharing images of happy times with family, company promotions, and motivational sayings. She seemed to be trying to pass off her husband's name, wasn't mired in controversy and blood. Fans, however, weren't duped. They interpreted her quiet as a tactic and evidence that she was precisely controlling the story. Because people start to wonder if perhaps, just possibly, when you refuse to engage and deny, you're at fault. Meanwhile, Tasha K smirked with satisfaction as she relaxed back with a glass of wine. There was no reason for her to drop fresh invoices. The task has already been done by her passwords. For months, she had been yelling that Mendeecees was unfaithful, that Yandy Smith was hiding flaws in a marriage that was already failing, and that his commitment was smoke and mirrors. Currently, Tamar Braxton Tasha K's voice seemed prophetic, as if she were prepared for waking up devastated after spending the night with him. Her name was as popular as theirs. As supporters linked her prior assertions to the current controversy, her reputation skyrocketed. However, when bloggers analyzed the pandemonium, the actual tragic events were being ignored. Tamar Braxton suffered psychologically, emotionally, and physically, and rather than being treated with empathy, her suffering was turned into a meme. Her blood became sensationalism rather than a source of pity. The fact that a woman woke up in her own bed drenched in blood was overlooked by fans, understanding how or why. The jokes buried that truth. Perhaps it was the most heinous aspect of all. The speculations, however, continued. Yandy ensured that the disrespect was dealt with when some people said Tamar and Mendeecees were stalking. Others stuck to the professional justification, claiming that Tamar's next graphics project featured Mendeecees Harris. He was there for that reason. Funky Denva was there for that reason. And for that reason, the night appeared suspicious. Fans, however, didn't buy it. Since this was mostly a visual event, why hasn't there been even one teaser? One frame to support his presence, one promo. Why does the alleged project seem less like a reality and more like a front? More individuals leaned into the stillness the longer it lasted. The theory of revenge. Yandy Smith had a reason for it. She was right. She was patient. Beaten down by whispers of infidelity for years. And without realizing it, Tamar Braxton, bold, feisty, and fearful of attention, had been the spark that ignited the flame. The "it" wasn't merely whispered in the streets, they let out a yell. This was the tipping moment for Yandy. Here's the problem, though. Yandy Smith didn't merely send Tamar a message if she did take revenge, either directly or indirectly. She sent a message to all the women in attendance. A warning shrouded in silence and violence. Don't mess with my union. The story stuck because of this. Why did the memes spread? Why supporters wouldn't let go? The violence wasn't the only factor. The symbolism was the main focus. And every hour the aftermath got more sinister. Tamar Braxton's earlier interviews, in which she chuckled about the havoc that followed her, were unearthed by fans. Recognized her propensity to flirt with fire, and confessed that she enjoyed attention. All of a sudden, folks weren't only curious in Tamar's fate that evening. They wanted to know if she caused it herself. Was she careless or a victim till she eventually got burned? No one involved killed the narrative, thus it refused to die. Tamar Braxton provided no explanation. There was no denial from Mendeecees. Yandy Smith strategically remained silent while playing the role of the polished wife, and bloggers like Tasha K and unwilling narrators were funky de novo. They turned their words into receipts. As each day goes on, the scandal escalated beyond the facts. It turned into a legend. What does it mean for the truth, then? Perhaps concealed by Tamar's quiet. Perhaps hidden behind Yandy's plan. Perhaps locked deep within Mendeecees' silence. Or perhaps the narrative has taken on a life of its own, and the truth is no longer even relevant. Atlanta seemed heavier than normal the morning after the turmoil. The clubs were deserted, the neon lights had gone off, yet the previous night's murmurs persisted in not dying off. Rather, they flooded every social media corner and spanned timelines. Prior to breakfast, hashtags were trending. The same identities surfaced as memes spread more quickly than the reality could. Repeatedly. Mendeecees, Yandy Smith, and Tamar Braxton. What had begun as a festive evening had devolved, turned into one of the city's most unsettling and widely discussed scandals in recent memory. Furthermore, there was a consensus that this wasn't only about dental fractures or bruising. It dealt with treachery, seeking revenge, and using quiet as a weapon and a shield. The pictures of Tamar Braxton had gone viral by dawn. The image of her bloated face, her nose, and the unsettling fact that her teeth were missing broken. The world did what it usually does, and they weren't simply indications of violence. They were signs of shame. Rather than showing empathy, it transformed her suffering into a show. Her site was inundated with harsh messages, memes, jokes, and unending conjecture. The she wasn't shown on the internet as a lady who was bleeding in her own house. They thought she was happy. They viewed her as amusement, and the true sorrow was hidden in that change. The inquiries became louder with each hour that goes by. When Tamar went to bed, who was in that house? What actually transpired following the laughing from Did the Club Fade? Did she trip and fall? Was the brutality arbitrary? Or did someone bring a message inside her house? The message was unmistakable in the version that the streets put together. Regarding her marriage, Yandy Smith doesn't mince words. The timetable was too well-fitting. The motivation was too plausible, and the participants' silence gave the rumors the appearance of being the truth. Because it's perilous to be silent. The same Tamar Braxton who made a living by clapping back on suddenly. After loudly and unrepentantly defending herself, she said nothing. No attempt to clarify the air, no denial, no live feed. Just a spooky silence. And in the perspective of the supporters, that silence turned into a confession in itself. Because why wouldn't Tamar do so if she had nothing to conceal? Declare it from the roofs? Why allow the public to portray her as a lady who is crawling with men if she was innocent, and everything was a misunderstanding? Paying the price for the spouse of another woman? The more she remained silent, the more the story was able to develop naturally. It got worse the more people believed. Harris of Mindy dug into his tried-and-true tactic. He has mastered the knack of remaining unfazed in the middle while allowing storms to roar. He didn't keep Tamar safe. He didn't stand up for Yandy. His own name was not cleared. No amount of denial could have overshadowed his silence, since the guy who fights back, the man who is innocent and realizes he is being forced into a falsehood, Mendeecees didn't defend himself. He allowed ladies to bleed. He allowed suspicion to fall on his wife. And without doing anything, he let his name to be dragged over every headline. Furthermore, the silence did not absolve. He was cursed by EMTT. He was damned. But Yandy Smith's quiet seemed different. It was planned, methodical, and carefully chosen. She crammed her page with well-curated photos of her kids and her company, endeavors, her optimism. She kept her timeline unaffected by the controversy. Nevertheless, that exact quiet turned into the loudest yell, as it was perceived as control by the crowd. They thought she was choosing not to dispute the tale the streets were telling because she didn't mind letting it out, and that she knew more than she was expressing. Her tactic, her weapon, and her shield was silence. And the vengeance story got stronger with each well-written piece. And then there was Tasha K., the constant presence in controversies like these.